Hey guys, Christoph the Polish Geek here and welcome to another top 10 list. This time I'm talking about 10 best video games with best storytelling. Yes, all of those games are some of my favorites of all time. Not all of my favorites, because some of my favorite video games I would not say excel when it comes to stories, but those 10 certainly do. And yeah, it will kind of spoil some of my favorite video games of all time, because yes, I'm totally planning to do my top favorite video games of all time, maybe top 20 actually favorite video games of all time, because there are so many video games I love. But those 10 are the video games when it comes to story alone. And don't necessarily assume that my number one is actually my favorite game of all time, because no, this is only purely in terms of storytelling. Good games, besides good storytelling, they also have amazing gameplay. They should have amazing graphics, and yeah, good games need a lot of other amazing things outside of an amazing story. So again, the video games here I'm going to talk about, the ranking is purely in terms of storytelling, and purely that, nothing else. And also, I'm a huge fan of From Software games. They're not on this list. They mostly excel due to their amazing lore. But I wouldn't say there's actually a lot of narrative when it comes to them. Yes, those games are mostly about the lore. And not saying a good story shouldn't have a lore, in fact, most of the best stories have also an amazing lore, but again, this has to be a combination of both narrative and lore, and From Software games mostly have a lore with little narrative, so which is why they're not on the list. It doesn't change the fact they're still some of my favorite games of all time, but this list are my favorite video games purely in terms of storytelling. So as I already said, I'll repeat it again. Don't assume that they're ranked in order from my least favorite to my favorite. No, because as I said, some of those games on my favorite list might actually be higher than others, because again, this is purely in terms of amazing storytelling, and that's it. So let's get to my 10 video games with best stories. Coming in number 10 is a Blacktail Innocence. Yes, I really love the first game. The second game, A Blacktail Requiem, I know it was very popular with lots of people, but it wasn't really for me. I applaud them for making some bold choices, and I know a lot of people just love the second one, but for me the ending was a little too depressing for my taste. Especially that the first game kind of ended on a positive note, and in a way that there was no guarantee there will be a sequel. And as I said, the first game kind of ended in a positive note. But admittedly, the fact that there is a second game, which I said I'm not very fond of the story, is partially why it's only number 10. But I really love the story of the Derun siblings, Amicia and Hugo, and how they are running away from the Inquisition all around France. Yeah, and the relationship between Amicia and her little brother Hugo is just so touching, so amazing. I really, really love their relationship. And also there are many other likable characters like Lucas, the twins, Millie and Arthur, I believe. And there's Roderick. Yeah, it's a really good story. And I also think has an amazing character development, because Amicia actually starts as very distant from her brother and almost barely knows him, they're 10 years apart, but later she has to take care of him, and I think it's a very well done sibling relationship, which I'll admit I kind of relate to, because I also have an older sister who is 6 years older than me, and yeah, we had a similar relationship, although we're always closer from the beginning. So yeah, I love the story of Blacktail Innocence. And again, as I said, Blacktail Requiem, if you love the game, I'm very happy for you. As I said, I respect the game and applaud for some of the bold choices it made, but again, it's not really for me. Blacktail Innocence, that's very much for me. Number 9, and that will be very unpopular opinion because this game has not been very popular in long launch, and it's also the first Assassin's Creed game. There will be 2 other Assassin's Creed games on this list. Yeah, huge Assassin's Creed fan, and that game is Assassin's Creed Unity. I love Assassin's Creed Unity so much. And fun fact, this is actually my very favorite Assassin's Creed game ever. Yes, on this list is actually the other 2 rank higher because when it comes to a story alone, I say they are slightly better than Unity in terms of story alone. Like, I prefer Unity for many other reasons, but this is focused on the story, so let's go back to the story. I love the story of Arno and how it takes place in French Revolution. It's kind of a romance story between an assassin and a Templar, and Arno was actually raised by a Templar because his assassin father gets killed in the very beginning. And I loved it so much, and I love the story of Arno and Elise. She's a Templar, he's an assassin, but they have a very good romance and chemistry together. I love it so much. And the story takes place in French Revolution, and although many people say it doesn't quite use its French Revolution setting as much as some other games used their historical setting, but I disagree. If you do lots of Paris stories and side missions, you very much start feeling really the French Revolution, and I love that. As for the main narrative, well, I think it actually makes sense for it to be more of Arno's personal story. I love that personally. And I also love how Arno actually is a different protagonist than most. His goal is not necessarily to defeat the Templars, but it's more of a personal story to improve himself and learn from his past mistakes. I love all that. And I also love that, spoiler alert, he gets expelled from an assassin order at some point, which really makes him an even more relatable character. Yeah, I think Arno is the most relatable character in terms of Assassin's Creed, and the ending is kind of pretty sad actually. So, it's bittersweet, yeah, because the ending of the Blacktail Requiem that I talked is outright depressing, but an ending of Assassin's Creed Unity is very bittersweet, and I kind of like bittersweet endings in general, yeah. I guess I'm not into happily ever after endings or too depressing endings. Bittersweet, that's my taste personally, most of the time. So yes, Assassin's Creed Unity at number 9. Coming in number 8, Knights of the Old Republic. Yes, you already know how much I'm a Star Wars fan, and Knights of the Old Republic is one of the best Star Wars story ever. Some people would argue it's even better than the original trilogy, and I can totally see that. It so much expands on the lore of the Force. It takes place 4,000 years before the movies, and which honestly makes the galaxy and the age feel so much bigger. I love that. You can actually choose light side, dark side. I generally choose light side, but you can actually choose, which makes it all the better. And also, you play as a protagonist, but then in midway from the game there's a really cool twist, which most of the fans know very much what I'm talking about, but if you haven't played it, I will not spoil it. But yes, Knights of the Old Republic is literally one of the best stories ever. It has great characters, it's also great twists, and literally, if it was a movie, I think it very much would be considered probably on par with Empire Strikes Back, because that's how fantastic the story of Knights of the Old Republic is. The sequel, The Sith Lords, also has a great story, but considering the game was unfinished and you have to mod it, I decided to go with the first game, but both games are amazing and have literally super amazing story. Number 7, and that's another Assassin's Creed game, although this time more like a spin-off that takes place in the same universe, and that's Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Yeah, I love that game so much. I know there are some people who don't like the story, but I love it personally. It's really more of a Greek tragedy than a authentic Assassin's Creed game, which isn't bad necessarily. As I said, it takes place many years before the Templar-Assassin conflict actually started, and I love it all the more for it. Like, that way it gave the creators more freedom to do with the story what they wanted. And I love the story of Cassandra, because yes, I usually play as Cassandra, like, and how she is looking for her family, and then how she tries to redeem her brother Alexios, who's Demos, although canonically doesn't work actually. And I also love how the game makes very much a use of its ancient Greece setting and all. The side quests are pretty interesting and amazing. And even the DLC, the first one, Legacy of the First Blade, is great actually. Though it's quite obvious that it doesn't really make a use of all the potential endings in the main story. I think it would be more helpful if it did actually make a use of that, but oh well, it is what it is. Still, Assassin's Creed Odyssey has a very amazing story, and Cassandra is one of the most likable as protagonists in the Assassin's Creed franchise. So yeah, I love the story of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Number 6, Chrono Trigger. Yes, this JRPG is so amazing. Like, I very recently played it on the Super Nintendo, and it's so amazing. Like, it's so unique. I love the characters. The characters are so amazing, likable. There's Chrono, there is Marley, there is Luca, Frog. Yeah, the characters are just amazing, and also they deal with a threat that is basically like Lovecraftian, like Lavos. But the most amazing part about the story is how just unique it is that they travel around various different time periods. Medieval times, dinosaurs, modern days, and even the end of time. Yeah, literally the end of time. This is more like a relaxation point, the end of time, but yeah, even the end of time they travel, which like really makes it amazing and unique. Chrono Trigger literally is one of the most unique stories I've ever played. Love the story of Chrono Trigger and the likable characters. Number 5, and this is the final Assassin's Creed game on this list. Yeah, I kind of feel bad of dominating this list with Assassin's Creed games, but oh well. And that's Assassin's Creed the Ezio Trilogy. Yes, I was actually debating which of those 3, but I ultimately picked Ezio Trilogy as the best story of those 3 Assassin's Creed games, for the simple reason that you basically play for his whole life. Like, first, like as a young man in Assassin's Creed 2, then as a middle-aged man in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and then in Revelations he's a full-on old man and the mentor of the Assassin Brotherhood. Like, it doesn't get often when you get to play throughout the character's whole life. And also, this is the game that really mostly explores the whole Assassin's Creed lore as a whole, and the conflict between Assassins and the Templars. Yeah, in this game, you really learn most about it. I mean, you do also learn a little bit about in Unity too, that I mentioned, but in this game, it's really where you learn the most about it. And I also love how they connected the very first game, the first Assassin's Creed 2. I love how many connections they make. Plus, Ezio is objectively the best Assassin's Creed character and the most likable one, which is also why he was constantly returning. Because yes, who doesn't love Ezio? So yes, Assassin's Creed the Ezio collection, probably the best Assassin's Creed story, though the others I mentioned are also pretty amazing. Number 4, and it's a tie between 2 games because they are basically like 2 parts of the same story, so I decided to put them together in one spot. Kind of like my number 3 will also be 3 games 1, but let's focus on those 2 first. And it's a tie between God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok. Yes, those games are basically 2 parts of the same story, and I love all of the God of War franchise. And I don't necessarily think the story of the Greek mythology era were bad, quite the opposite, they were also great stories, but in addition to stories, they also focused a lot on brutality and amazing boss battles and Kratos' rage, while this game, while still retains many of the things that made previous games great, it is clearly decided to focus more on the actual narrative and Kratos' character development. And I love Kratos' character development. Like, he goes from a raging lunatic who kills gods to a loving father. I mean, still very strict, but very much a loving father. And his relationship with his son Atreus is so great. I love their father-son dynamic. I love it so much. And also, it's actually a huge achievement that those two are my favorite games in the franchise, because I already said a couple of times, I am a Greek mythology geek. I love Greek mythology so much. I like Norse too, but Greek is my very much go-to. Yet, those games in Norse mythology, I think, very much exceeded my expectations, especially the first one, and they are very much my two favorite games in the franchise. Which really shows how well they done with a story. Because as I said, the story of God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok, they literally have the best stories in the whole franchise. And I said, I love how also here there are a lot more characters rather than just Kratos killing someone off. Here you actually have like Kratos actually interact with a lot of characters like Mimir, Freya, yeah. And again, I hope it doesn't seem like I'm ranting about the Greek mythology games, because as I said, the Greek era are still some of the greatest games of all time. Like, and I still deeply love them, but ultimately I put those two here because in terms of story and narrative alone, I say those two games are certainly exceed all the other games in the series. And many of the games in the world. Number 3, and this time it's a trilogy as a whole, and that's the Witcher Trilogy. Yeah, I love The Witcher so much. Like, I haven't read the books, yeah, but I did play all 3 of the video games, and I love them so much. Like, I think all 3 of those games have amazing, incredible, super fantastic, engaging stories with fantastic characters. All 3. Yes. That's why I included them all in one spot, because I think all 3 of those games have amazing stories. Though in the third Witcher, actually, it's especially amazing, huge achievement, because some of the side quests alone already have very amazing stories. That's right, it's not just the main narrative that's amazing in the third game, but some of the individual side quests alone already make up for some super amazing stories. And what I also know, that apparently if you read the books, like, those games become even more amazing and emotional, which means maybe I should read the books at some point in my life. Because I heard that you actually even have far better time enjoying those stories with if you read the books. But overall, all 3 Witcher games have ultra amazing stories, and honestly, yeah, they have just super amazing stories. What else can I say? Oh yeah, and I have to say that some of the amazing choices that those games literally make, they are some of the most creative things I've ever seen. But there are so many of them to list that, well, let's just say all 3 of the games have super amazing stories, and all 3 deserve to be experienced. Yeah. And I probably need to read the books. Oh yeah, and I have to say that some of the amazing choices that those games literally make, they are some of the most creative things I've ever seen. But there are so many of them to list that, well, let's just say all 3 of the games have super amazing stories, and all 3 deserve to be experienced. Coming in number 2, and that's a very underrated hidden gem that most people don't know, but it's so amazing, and that's Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future. Like, this game's story literally feels like a science fiction story. I mean, it is a science fiction story, but it very much feels like it was written for a book or something like that, because it's so magnificent. Like, and I heard it was actually written by a sci-fi writer who actually writes science fiction books. So yeah, it's no surprise that this story is just so super amazing. It's basically in the far future where humans and dolphins live in peace, and The game mostly takes place under the ocean, and I love oceans so much. And then aliens invade and steal various traits of dolphins. So Echo, the dolphin, travels around different like timelines in order to restore his original timeline. And yes, in those timelines we see various different terrible events that happen. In one, oceans are completely polluted. So yes, oceans are completely polluted and like humans have died out while dolphins barely cling to life. And then another where dolphins became so aggressive and drove humans out from the oceans forever, but at the same time created an underwater society that kind of feels like a futuristic ocean society for dolphins, yes. But dolphins rule with dictatorship there. And then there is a third timeline where aliens succeeded in conquering the Earth. So yeah, some would call this story absurd, but no, I personally find this story like wicked cool and very much a science fiction story. And as I said, no wonder it was written by an actual science fiction book writer. Because yes, this story would perfectly work as a great science fiction movie or a great science fiction book. That's right. Echo the Dolphin Defender of Future has one of the best stories ever and one of the best stories in video games history. Oh, and it is so underrated too. It deserves so much more love and popularity. But oh well. At least I'm the one that says that how amazing it is, because someone has to. And number one game, in terms of storytelling at least, maybe not the best game in the world as a whole, that probably like those games probably was either my number 3, that probably is my favorite game ever, but in terms of storytelling alone, my number 1 is Final Fantasy VI. Yeah, the story of this game is just so magnificent, so amazing, and the characters are so likable too. I love Terra and Celeste and Locke and Edgar, Sabin. Yeah, like the characters in this game, like the game has an amazing story alone already for its super spectacular cast of amazing characters. And then the villain Kefka is like one of the most evil and fantastic villains in video gaming history. But the most unique and awesome part about the game is already the first half already is an amazing story, but what really puts this game over the edge over all other games is that halfway through the game, Kefka succeeds in his goal actually to destroy the world, and he succeeds in destroying it. And then the second half of the game is that like our amazing set of characters reuniting with each other because they survived, and in a post-apocalyptic wasteland they unite to destroy Kefka once and for all. Like, this was a really bold choice to make, actually, to have a bad guy actually succeed in destroying the world. And also defeating him then feels so much more satisfying and rewarding afterwards. But as I said, even without that, the story would be spectacular, but this alone gives it an edge to be all the way to number 1. But so yeah, Final Fantasy VI, the story is so spectacular, the characters are some of the best characters in all of fiction, and in terms of storytelling alone, I say Final Fantasy VI is probably the best video game story ever, which says a lot because like almost all the games on this list all of the games on this list have amazing stories. But Final Fantasy VI, though I said beat them all, but I guess you could say number 2 and 3 give it a run for its money. So I say my top 3 basically are almost like in competition with each other, but still, that's how I feel at least today. Okay guys, so here are my top 10 favorite video game stories. Yes, as I said, those aren't exactly my favorite video games of all time. I mean, all of those games on this list are literally some of my favorite video games of all time, but this is not a ranking from my least favorite to my favorite game. No, this is a ranking purely of their stories. Yes. And even then, it can change, because sometimes I prefer this story, sometimes this. So yeah, even then, this ranking can actually change at some point or another. It's mostly how I feel at this moment, actually, because especially in my top 3 alone already, as I just said before, already it's really hard to say which of those 3 games really has the most excellent story. So this, I guess I call it ranking, but they're not exactly in particular order anyway, because as I said, it easily can change actually, but I'm absolutely sure those are my favorite video game stories ever. Some might wonder why The Last of Us isn't here. Well, I already said it before and I will say it again. I sadly never got into the first Last of Us. Like, I know this game seems like a popular choice for number 1 best video game story among most people, but sadly I just never got into The Last of Us. I never got into it, that's all. Although I do know Red Dead Redemption 2 story is very popular among gamers. Yeah, I probably should play Red Dead Redemption 2. It's actually here among my PS4 collection. So, but those are my favorite video game stories as of now, at least. So, okay guys, thank you for checking out this video. Press the like button. Please subscribe to this channel. Tell me your favorite video game stories ever. Are any of those on your list too? Comment below, let me know. Please subscribe to this channel again, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you later, bye!